Welcome to the Business of Platforms, a video podcast series where Vivaldi will be chatting with the world's leading marketers, thinkers, and innovators about the evolution of business and the exciting ways in which platforms are helping companies and brands deliver greater value.
My name is Erich Joachimsthaler. I'm the CEO and founder of Vivaldi. I'm honored to be here with Mayur Gupta. Mayur Gupta is the Global Vice President for Growth and Marketing at Spotify. If anybody knows a company and observes a company, it is Spotify. It's a marketplace that brings millions of fans together with millions of artists. It's been a huge success story, we know, and I'm so pleased to have you here, Mayur. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
If I can say a few words about Mayur. Mayur is not only in charge of growth at Spotify, he's also a thought leader. Actually, personally, I have tracked you for years now and read your wonderful writing. You're a marketing technologist. I tracked you all the way to consumer product companies you joined, where you helped lead the digital effort, B2B work in healthcare, and now at Spotify. Now, I did some research on Spotify. There was a Fast Company article, one of the few interviews that your CEO, Daniel Ek, gave, and I was just astonished about the numbers. And in 2015, there were 60 million subscribers, 15 million paying. In 2018, you have about 170 million subscribers and 75 million paying. Quarter one revenues is 1.3 billion. Quarter two revenues is 1.5 billion. This is going to be a $6 billion company by the end of 2018. Now, I just have to understand this. You can give me this answer. How is it possible that you have achieved all that in just less than 2 years? You joined in October 2016. How did that happen?
Yeah, so that's a $1 million question, but I have to admit that a lot of that happened even prior to me joining the company. A lot of the brilliant work, and yes, you refer to Daniel's interview, which is pretty fascinating, not only for everybody who's not in Spotify, but all of us who are working at Spotify. And I think he made a fundamental comment in that article, which I can so relate to, which is he said our success is determined by our ability to move faster than anybody else in the space. And I think fundamentally that's been the core premise of what we try to imbibe in every single part of the organization. And of course, there have been a lot of different strategies we've applied over the last 12 or so years, and one of them in particular that Gustav, who's our Chief Product Officer, again in the same article talks about, is back in 2013 when we made our free tier available on mobile. That totally changed the trajectory of our growth. But there are many such instances that we've applied. But I personally feel underneath a lot of those strategies is this cross-functional belief that we have to keep innovating, keep challenging the status quo, and keep taking risks.
So my question then is, I've read your articles on marketing as a growth engine. How does that relate to us? What do you see at Spotify, or maybe another example that makes this marketing such a growth engine, sort of like that, what you just referred to, the cross-functional sort of belief of acting fast?
Yeah. So, of course, Spotify as a company gives you a blank canvas, for you to draw and prove out a lot of your strategies and theories that, in other companies you can only write on paper. But one belief we have in Spotify is growth cannot be driven by any single function in isolation. We strongly believe it's a cross-functional effort. True growth for companies happen at the intersection of product, content, marketing, and many other aspects. So from that standpoint, there is no single layer that is solely and individually responsible to drive growth. It's a cumulative effort. Purely from a marketing standpoint, especially at a point where, of course, Spotify has now proven the product market fit. You shared some numbers from that article, which are publicly shared. But at this stage in the company, we strongly believe marketing's role is in terms of creating demand, we call it demand creation and demand capture. That's literally our framework, that's our blueprint. And what I mean by demand creation is if you really think about your entire addressable audience in these series of concentric circles, where the innermost circles represent, either your existing audiences or the audiences and fans, as we call them, that you have the right to win now because they are literally on the peripheral of coming into your ecosystem. They know and they love about Spotify, everything they hear about Spotify. Demand creation is about identifying those audiences that represent the outer circles, that would not have come otherwise. And we strongly believe that's one of core marketing's mission is how do we identify who those outer circle audiences are? And then how do we leverage the power of our brand, our ability to connect with culture, our ability to use the brand to connect those audiences with culture, to soften them and bring them through through into our ecosystem. So that's one big portion, one big area to create and identify new audiences. Of course, there's a lot of science underneath. The second part is demand capture, which I feel is a more scientific part of marketing at Spotify, which is extremely intertwined with data, technology, and content. And as I call it, it is about, leveraging that created demand and bringing them home.
Yes.
And then how do we use data and technology on an ongoing basis in an always-on mindset to bring them back to the platform one more time and one more time, continue to maximize the lifetime value, continue to use data to deliver experiences that matter, that are more contextual, more relevant, and so on.
So how, when you say, just an example, when you say demand creation from this outer circle, bring them home, it means bring them on the Spotify platform. So, and you talk about how can you give me an example of how this works? Because for example, I read the way you change the product on a constant basis. That sort of suddenly has achieved a lot of growth. That's sort of from a product side. Is there sort of a marketing example that you would have?
So of course, on an ongoing basis, there's innovation happening in every aspect of the organization, and we believe in creating these cross-functional units that are all aligned towards an outcome. So when product is working on something, there's marketing working together with them, content working together with them towards that one single outcome, executing one single plan. And you've read about the company bets and so on, which are great manifestation of that methodology. But what I mean by demand creation is if someone's working on a product that we believe is going to resonate more with audiences that aren't core to Spotify, anybody which is, let's say, in a particular market, we choose to go, beyond the core audience, which are the millennials.
Yes.
Then marketing will figure out, leveraging data and our understanding of that audience, their barriers, their needs, their attitudes, what will inspire them to take a certain action, will start to transform that into content that is more relevant. And when it's demand creation, we may use more mass media channels to drive reach, and then use demand capture in a more targeted and a more scientific way to bring them through the funnel. But what's unique, we believe, about marketing's accountability together with other functions is we're not just holding ourselves accountable to create that so-called awareness and consideration, the typical traditional funnel acronyms, but actually bringing them through the funnel and doing our best to retain them through more relevant experiences by surfacing the right kind of content. So taking them through, from activation to onboarding to habit creation, ultimately looking at and holding ourselves accountable to retention and more long-term KPIs as opposed to just measuring installs and downloads and registrations.
So may I say then that there is the secret sauce to Spotify is a unique way of demand creation and demand capture. And the way you have configured that engine, I think you have talked about the growth engine and always on growth engine. The way you have configured that rather than the traditional approach of, let's say a funnel that pushing more people on the top to get more people to the bottom, if you will, through the funnel, and some sort of secret sauce that's the alternative, right?
Yeah. I'll be honest, I don't know if there's one single secret sauce because it's just such a fascinating place where I feel very fortunate being in marketing. being able to market such a brilliant product.
Yeah.
You know, a product that has grown tremendous organic growth,
Yeah.
because there's still a reasonable percentage of our growth that comes through word of mouth, right? Which is again a key indicator for a massive product market fit in our case. Then you benefit from, you know, brilliant features that organically provide network effects. As an example, you know, we have collaborative playlists where, you know, the value of the platform increases as you bring your family and friends. You know, then we've imbibed that in our business model, in our subscription business, when you have family plans where a 15-year-old kid will almost, if not influence, sometimes even force the parents to sign up for Spotify because it's such a millennial experience and so on. But purely from a marketing standpoint, I think we strongly believe that the linear funnel of demand creation and demand capture, you know, should be made cyclic. That's why the focus is to leverage science and, you know, the art and science of marketing to not only focus on the volume of users and fans that we bring to our ecosystem, but the quality of those fans and the effort we put in to inspire those fans who come to become brand advocates, so that one fan can bring two more fans. And then this is where we're also starting to leverage more contextual marketing content, which is more shareable, because these are all levers to drive, you know, growth loops. So if we figured out more immersive way to surface our core content on the platform, that allows users and inspires them to share it on so many social platforms off platform, then you use technology like deep links to bring those non-users directly into a stream, which we believe is, of course, our biggest value proposition. The aha moment is removing the friction and get a non-user to experience the magic of Spotify.
Now I just realized that actually I am caught into that system that Spotify has created. I used to be the one that runs using, not paying, because I'm sort of the cheap guy in the family. My daughters and my son and my wife, they would have the subscription, and now suddenly I've noticed we are all part of the family plan.
Sure.
And on and on. It's almost you say that part science and part understanding the context, in this case a family of viewers, of listeners, if you will, and sort of like getting us connected in some ways, in so many ways. Fantastic.
Totally. Yeah. And, you know, I know the art and science of marketing is much of a cliche, but, you know, I think it's quite real in many ways. It's very complex at the same time.
Yeah.
And we focus a lot on that. And me coming from a pure engineering and a technology background, and having evolved in the world of data and now sitting at the center of marketing in one of the best brands in the world, what I've come to appreciate way more than I ever had in my past career is the impact and the importance of a brand. You know, the impact and importance of the emotional connection with your audience, the connection with the culture, you know, the serendipity, the irrationality of marketing that should never be neglected. So at Marketing at Spotify, we define growth in three very simple pillars. You know, is growing the brand, growing your user base, and growing the user value. And you can literally take these three pillars and ladder them up back into demand creation and demand capture. But the first one, which is growing the brand, we've not only, you know, gone at length to measure the impact of our brand, and of course we adamantly believe the value that a strong brand brings. We now have quantitatively proven the incremental impact of a strong brand to downstream business KPIs.
Oh, wait. I come from the branding world, and what I understand to be the branding world is about spending money on media, usually large advertising. I call it spray and pray, and you pray that finally they will sign up or will go to the store and get on the shelf and choose the product. So this is a new way of marketing, a new way of branding. You're not talking about the traditional branding effort. So curious, in the traditional branding effort, the typical metrics that David Archer, professor at Berkeley, and I used in the past was awareness, recognition of the logo, recall of key messages and things like that. These are not the metrics that you would sort of look at in order to define brand strength.
Yeah.
What would it be?
That's an interesting topic, and one that I'm sure you and I can spend the whole day, because I love measurement, and that's a big part of what I do and what my team does. But first, the first part of your question about the brand and how we talk about brand. And if you ever hear Seth Farbman, who's our CMO, he will say, we never market the brand. We never tell the brand story. We always tell the stories of our fans, and the stories of the artists and their connection with music, their connection with culture. And what's most fascinating in that we always do is we leverage data to tell that story in more inspirational and creative ways and whatnot. But purely in terms of how we measure that. So on one hand, I actually would not say that we've identified and innovated these new set of KPIs that purely go vertically down to tell you how strong your brand is. Of course, we still look at awareness, we still look at consideration with a lot of question marks, right? Because we believe, these are very macro KPIs. So we are challenging ourselves to find out more micro and leading KPIs that tell us about the brand. What I meant was, we're not limiting ourselves to just that, because that doesn't do much.
Yes.
At the end, you want to find out, what does a strong brand, let's say that 70% of your addressable audience is aware of and feels strongly connected with, what does that do to ultimately your downstream business KPIs, whether that is the number of subscribers or your monthly active users or X, Y, and Z. So what we've done is, through a lot of experimentation, proven that when you are in a market or a portion of a market where your brand isn't as strong, the efficiency with which you capture demand and you're driving growth is very low compared to the efficiency and effectiveness of your growth engine when you have a strong brand. And we've used some of those experimentation methodologies to prove the incrementality. And we're still very early on in the process, but we now have tangible data to support an emotional belief.
And are you then, if I may venture, emerging in the next year to come, and let's say over time, into a new brand model? Because it seems like you're working on some new metrics and new forms of measuring the brand. What I really like about that is this idea that it's all about the consumer, and it's the connection with the consumer and the interaction with the consumer. So brand is not defined in terms of perceptions. Brand is defined in terms of what the role of Spotify is in the context of people's lives, let's say.
Totally. Yeah. I think at the center of everything is that human. Yeah. And it's easier said than done. Yeah. So it's been a journey for us, and it's still a journey. But I think, going back to your point, yes, whether it's a new model or not, but I feel we look at the fact that those three pillars of growth, growing the brand and the user base, these are extremely intertwined.
Yes.
They are extremely interdependent.
Yes.
And you cannot do one versus the other. So on one hand, while we've invested a lot in data and technology and the science of marketing in the last 2 years, at the same time we make a conscious effort to make sure we're not over-indexing on that side.
I see.
Because then you lose the emotion, you lose the cultural connection of the brand. And that's the magical part of where we believe we are in our own journey, that we've now proven the core cross-pollination, the amplification of demand creation and demand capture. Now, having said that, the same rigor we have to apply even in that demand capture, which is growing the user base and growing the user value. Yes. And there's a lot of work that marketing is doing in partnership with other functions in the organization.
I'm totally fascinating. 3 things: growing the brand, growing the user base, and growing the value to the user. Yeah. These are 3 these are directionally almost like every business, even even non-platform businesses
Yep.
ought to measure the brand, because it goes back to the value to the user.
Yep.
That is about retention. It goes back to the business. You want to grow your user base. That's
Yep.
how you went to 170 million from 60 million in a few years of users.
Yep.
And it goes back to the, as you said, I love it, the emotional connection. It is not just an analytical question. It's an emotional merging of, if you will, art and science, or merging sort of the humanity with the math.
Yes.
of the business.
Yes. And
Or
I think-
magic and math.
I think you summarize it
Yeah.
perhaps more beautifully than I did. But needless to say, in those three pillars,
Yes.
the most challenging for anybody is that last pillar, which is retention.
Yes.
Right? Because you can somewhat struggle your way through to the first two, but getting them through the door is possible. Like I remember at one point 2 years back, you had a quote that said, money can no longer buy love.
Yes.
And I think money can go to a certain extent to bring the user, but you can't keep them
Yes.
until you have an experience that truly connects with their needs and barriers. So hence, the mission for marketing at Spotify now is not just to continue to grow the brand, grow the user base, but grow the user value, over a period of time.
Yeah, money cannot buy love. That's the long-term thing.
Yeah.
It can buy short-term thing, perhaps. Very cool. I will not go any further on this. We are close to the end of our podcast already. I apologize to have wandered on this wonderful journey on this. The way you manage the brand is, and the way you manage the business, the user base, user value, and brand value. I think this is, to me, very, very, very key to the work. If I were to ask you, is there some things that you would want to leave the readers about your point of view of how marketing evolves right now? Whether you manage a platform business like Spotify, or you're managing a more traditional, let's say, pipeline or value chain business. Is there sort of these are my three takeaways that I would leave, the Mayur Gupta takeaways. Is there anything like that?
Look, we're all learning, every single day, and I often think about this is such interesting times for any discipline, marketing included, because we're living in an era of constant disruption.
Yeah.
We're living in an era of consumer where technology is enabling the disruption, but the core protagonist of the disruption is the consumer, and they are the ones who continuously keep removing the barriers that are in their way. So I feel that marketing, just as a function in itself, has dramatically transformed and has to keep dramatically transforming in order to even have a chance to win that consumer who now has so much power, so much access, so much choice, and so on. And I feel it's almost like when I was growing up, I always looked at the medical profession, because we have so many doctors in our family who are constantly studying, because there is this constant influx of viruses in the world. So they have to keep working on new vaccines and study about them. I feel marketing is the same way. There is a proliferation of technology where the consumer demands, desire, and expectation continuously go a notch up,
Yes.
every single day.
Yes.
So as a marketer, you have to keep evolving. And marketing is no longer about marketing. In fact, that's the biggest barrier, is how do you, enable marketing to stop marketing, to start understanding, to start conversing, which cannot be done by marketing alone. That's why every marketer has to now be a data analyst. They have to be a technologist. They have to think product. They have to think cross-functionally. And
I love that, because that is your first point, because that is what marketing used to be. Is marketing used to look at consumers as targets that you position toward with a particular message.
Yeah.
Now, what you suggest here is that marketing is it's a conversation. You're engaging with the consumer. Consumers are contributors, if you will. So marketing, particularly in a platform, consumers provide data that enable you to improve the product in real time sometimes. That creates value not only to I may say at Spotify, not only to Spotify, but also to the artists who try to reach consumers.
Huge.
Yes.
And I know we don't have time, but that's why I feel marketing is now an always-on engine. It can no longer just have a start and end date of a campaign, because the traditional value of depth.
Yes.
Marketing has to continuously listen and interpret the user needs, the consumer needs, the consumer demand. And almost the way I summarize the purpose of marketing now is the ability to predict what the user need is even before she knows she needs it. That's the magic of data. That's the epitome, for any marketer, for any product person to deliver that to the user.
You just triggered one more thing, because I read about your work, because you talked in one article you wrote about expectations versus experience. I think you just spoke to this.
Yeah.
That marketing needs to deliver on expectations and needs to almost anticipate rather than just create an experience.
Totally.
Because it's the expectation, met or unmet, that actually gets people
drives
to...
John.
Drives,
right.
Yes.
And that's the art and science of marketing.
Yeah.
So the science gets you closer to what the expectation perhaps is for users who aren't in your ecosystem yet. And then you use the art of marketing to communicate it. Because sometimes I think we get too intertwined with just focusing on changing the experience, and we forget to reset the expectation. But when the two combine, that's the magical moment. That's when you truly have a product market fit.
Fantastic. I'm so pleased to have you here, Mayur, and share the thoughts that you have. Mayur is, you can find Mayur anywhere online in just typing your name, but you can find him on Twitter on @InspireMarTech. You're a prolific blogger, you're a thought leader, you are a wonderful executive, a good friend of the marketing community. I appreciate so much for being here and taking your time. Thank you, Mayur.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thanks.